In 27 hours, our friend Mayu, Andrew and 7 others will be led to a firing range and shot dead. This morning it emerged that a judge asked for $130,000 in exchange for a lighter sentence. These are serious allegations. They need to be investigated and the executions need to be halted. What do we do when law and diplomacy have failed? The principles of justice and equality have proven enough for France and Europe to take a strong stand. Should Tony Abbott, our Prime Minister, advocate as strongly as the French, the Philippines and the Indonesians?
Arthur Sinodinos.
Well, Carmini, that's a very important question because people's lives are at stake. At the beginning of this process, I underestimated how strongly community sentiment in Australia had moved on this issue. To see the vigils that have occurred across the country, the spontaneous outpouring of concern. I think part of it is because we've gotten to know the individuals involved in a way that perhaps in some other cases we haven't, and we've got to see their story and their journey and the way in which they appear to have been rehabilitated and how, in the paradox of what appears to be a chaotic Indonesian prison system, they seem to have come to a point where they are actually mentoring and counselling others. And this makes it very hard when you look someone like that in the eye, who appears to have repented, if I can use that sort of religious expression, to then say, well, they just deserve to die anyway. And you're right that we should be doing everything we can. The Australian government, the opposition, I think, have been very strong on this in seeking to make high-level representations. At every stage where there's been a legal issue that's been raised, the Australian government, the opposition and others have made the point these need to be fully resolved before we move to any next step. And you're right, there were issues raised today which raised some fundamental questions about the judicial process that was undertaken in these cases. Now, there's been talk through the newspapers, and today Julie Bishop alluded to this, that further actions could be taken in due course, including withdrawing the ambassador and the rest of it. I don't know what's going to happen. But
due course, though, we've got 27 hours. And we can't go back.
I understand.
I'm just going to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt you here, and it may be news you want to hear as well. In fact, it certainly will be. But we're just getting reports, and it's coming up on the auto cue here. Indonesia's constitutional court has agreed to consider a last-ditch legal challenge brought by the Bali 9 pair. The court agrees to hear the case on May the 12th. So,
well, so that does that mean? Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
That's wonderful news, but does that mean that they are not going to go ahead with tomorrow? Is that what it means? Because no one's talking to the family. I've spoken, you know, they had a harrowing day, delayed for 3.5 hours, only allowed to see the boys for 5 hours. Does that mean that they're not going to go ahead with the...
Well, I would assume so, given the news that we've just been told.
Okay, so they're going to have that court date.
Which is, again, this issue of continuing to fully exhaust all the legal processes. This is a very welcome development.
My question again will be, though, that, you know, up till now, they've been very, you know, they haven't been willing to look at a lot of the legal arguments. You know, we know in their constitution that they can allow a reprieve and commute a life sentence if a prisoner has shown that they have rehabilitated. But even regardless of that, we're talking about really basic issues of equality and justice. I can list you off cases, I won't do it to bore everyone, but I can list you off cases where there's been corruption. In other cases, I can list you worse crimes, worse drug crimes, where they have got lighter sentences or even been released.
Let's just hear from our panel on that, and we'll try and absorb the information that we've just received as well.
I just want to know, after the 12th, what's going to happen if we get a no. I don't want the family, I don't want the boys to be back in this situation, and the other 7.
Yes, well, I mean, the fact that an appeal sounds like it's being heard doesn't mean they'll win the appeal. It just means a delay, really, and another procedure. But let's hear from Tanya Plibersek.
Thank you for raising this issue. It is a really important issue and troubling many Australians. And I'm sorry, Tony, just having read that on the auto cue, I think we have to be very careful. We don't know the full range of information. We might hear updates through the course of the show or afterwards.
Yeah, it's just a media report at this stage, so we should bear that in mind.
We just have to be very careful because the information is, as you've said, is coming out in small pieces. From the very beginning, we have said that all of the legal processes must be allowed to run their course. And certainly there are still 2 outstanding legal processes underway. There's the Judicial Commission legal process, and there's also another legal process in the Constitutional Court. They must be allowed to be completed. We've said that all along. We've also said that the case of Myron Sukumaran and Andrew Chan is a fantastic example of the success of the Indonesian judicial system in allowing rehabilitation after 10 years in jail. These young men have not just turned their own lives around, they've been a positive influence on the lives of other prisoners. They've had the support of the jail governor in Bali saying exactly that. It seems particularly cruel after they've made such efforts to reform themselves to impose this sentence. It's not just a sentence on these young men, it's a sentence on anyone who knows them, anybody who loves them. While they're alive, they can repay their debt to society. Nobody's suggesting that there should be no punishment. It was a very serious crime, but while they are alive, they can continue to repay their debt to society. I'd also say more generally that Can I
just bring you to the original point in the question, which was about the corruption allegations now being made against the judges. I mean, we haven't got the detail from the information we've got, but perhaps that is the very thing that's caused the appeal.
And Tony, I think we need to be a little bit careful on how we handle this now, and I think the best way of handling it is to allow the Indonesian court processes to be completed. There's a lot of scrutiny on these court cases at the moment, and they should be allowed to run their course.